Hello, everybody. All right, welcome to the Mikestand. Today is Friday, April 25th, 2025. Hope everybody had a good week this week. As we're now at the end of the end of the final full week of April. Of course, April will fully come to an end this Wednesday, so the 30th. But anyway, so going to give people a chance to come in before we get started. Friendly reminder to everybody, of course, if you haven't already, if you guys can like and share the screen, see if we can get some more friendly people in here to engage. That'd be appreciated. Also, if anything here that we talk about grabs your attention, feel free to comment and or ask questions. I'll try to answer the questions to the best of my ability. So, with that being said, as I said, we're just waiting for people to show up, see if anybody else shows up before we get started. Talk a little bit about maybe about another minute or so. I'll probably talk about what's on tap for tonight, then we'll get into the content. Anyways, hopefully everybody's having as I said, everybody's having a good week. I'm sure everybody's excited for everybody. Hmm. Hmm. La 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 la. Hmm. All right, well, we're at the 2.5 minute mark. So I guess I'll talk about what's on tap for tonight. So for tonight, of course, we're going to go over a couple stories from Bleeding Fool, including comic artist, a comic artist called Robert Crumb, an incel, but in a good way. Wonder what that's supposed to mean. And there's the ongoing debate of whether or not normies ruin comic books. So we'll be looking at those two articles. Then we'll be doing of course, the wrestling wrap up. Get you caught up on from the action from last night's Ring of Honor and TNA shows. Well, looking ahead over the weekend, including tonight's SmackDown. I'll also be looking ahead to TNA Rebellion coming up this Sunday from Los Angeles. AEW's Collision as they continue to march towards Double or Nothing next month. And the WWE, of course, continues their post WrestleMania barrage as they head into Backlash in a couple of weeks here. So with all that being said, why don't we just go ahead and jump right into it? We're gonna get started on our first with our first article we're gonna cover tonight, which is the Robert Crumb article. This one's from our old buddy Avi Green. So, comic artist calls Robert Crumb an incel, quote unquote, but in a good way, in a quote unquote good way. Article by Avi Green published yesterday, 24th. Let's take a look at all this. And a friendly reminder, of course, if you guys haven't already, you guys can help out by liking and sharing the stream. See if we can get some more friendly people in here to engage. That'd be appreciated. Also, if anything here grabs your attention, feel free to comment and or ask questions, and I will try to answer the questions to the best of my ability. So here we go. Interview Magazine has an exchange between biographer Dan Nadell and artist Al Freeman about their past readings and inspirations in art, including what they think of cartoonist Robert Crumb, who's got a new biography coming out from Nadell. Um, here's what comes up in the whole discussion. So that was obviously now from the article here. Freeman, there must have been a point where you went from the superhero mainstream stuff to the Crumb world. Nadell, my entry into the Crumb world happened because, like a lot of Jewish kids, I found Mouse when I was 11 or 12. Freeman, oh, that's young to find Mouse. Nadell, I know, but I was already reading books about the Holocaust. So Mouse, again, we've been covering a lot of stuff on Mouse, on the Jewish comic, I guess. Nadell, I know, but yeah, we already read that part. So Freeman then says, you're a bit of a Holocaust head? And Nadell, yeah. Instead of being really into the latest video games, it was the latest Holocaust memoirs, so Mouse made a big impression. And then I was at a comic book convention at some point, maybe when I was 12, because there used to be these great comic cons in the neighborhood. So I could walk from my house to the local Holiday Inn. Freeman, to find other nerds, Nadell, and it was amazing. Anyway, I was milling around at the dealers, and they asked me what I was into, and I said, quote unquote, Mouse. So they handed me American Splendor, which was Crumb's collaboration with Harvey Pekar. And I just loved that. I still remember all the stories in that book really well. That was my entry point to Crumb. That work made perfect sense to me visually in my 14-year-old brain, like a sexual obsession. Okay. Oh boy. Okay, something's got to be a little screwy with your head there if you actually feel like a sexual obsession reading about the Holocaust. There's got to be a screw loose somewhere in there. And after that, I found Head Comics, which is a great book. I must have been 14 when I found Head Comics, and it just completely made sense to me, which is weird too. It totally makes sense, Freeman replied. And Nadell, if you're a 14-year-old alienated kid in the suburbs and you find something that's made by a nerdy guy and he's having sex and it's about pleasuring yourself, Freeman, it's an incel's okay? Okay. Okay. Oh, pardon me for a moment. I do need to go off camera here for a quick moment, but I'll be right back. All right, I'm back. Sorry about that. Well, anyways, let's get back to the article here. From that, let's see. So here's Avi responding. From that, it sounds like they're saying "quote unquote" incel is a good thing. And here in the past decade, it seemed as though most leftists were using the word as a slur against anybody they disagreed with in pop culture. Um, that aside, interesting, they bring up Mouse because that's a product of Art Spiegelman, who sadly one very left-wing ideologue, in parentheses, is Nadell getting the connections wrong, parentheses, and Picard was of the same political bent in the worst ways possible. So regardless of what one thinks of Crumb, for one, even the politics he likely goes by are very alienating. Here's more of the exchange on the issue of incels, quote unquote, and what comes next, unfortunately, is quite disgusting. So it almost sounds like Avi is telling us ahead of time that they're going to probably be talking more about pleasuring oneself. Oh boy. Anyways, if you guys haven't already, you guys can help out by liking and sharing the screen. See if we can get some more friendly people in here to engage. That'd be appreciated. Also, if anything here grabs your attention, feel free to comment and or ask questions. I'll try to answer the questions to the best of my ability. So back to the interview here. Freeman. But getting back to the incel thing, Nadell, do you see him as an incel? Freeman. I see him as an incel who turned it around and leveraged all of the undesirable incel qualities into something that he was able to really use to have a lot of sex. Okay. I think incel actually is short for incelibate. So, Nadell, it never occurred to me to think of him that way after all these years of working on this book. Freeman. Well, the incel thing wasn't a conversation in our culture until recently. But now, with hindsight, it's like, quote, that's what that persona is, unquote. Nadell, he also definitely has an enormous following amongst men who, I guess, could be considered incel or incel adjacent. There's people that just post his worst stuff, like RPS stuff, because, oh boy. Freeman. I think that's some of his best work, honestly. Nadell, um, the really unhinged stuff. Let's see, and then Freeman follows up here. Yeah, as someone who is repelled by moralizing culture, and as someone who likes to poke at people's limitations, it just seems like it wouldn't be allowed now. He says something in the book about comics, about how comics were a healthy place that he could play out these grotesque fantasies. And I think that art should be a place where it's safe to explore some of our most vulgar desires so that you don't end up shooting up a school. Oh, God. Oh, boy. Anyways, continuing on here. So this is Avi's response to what we just read. So, oh, for heaven's sake. So, if you don't wallow in vulgarity when writing fictional stories, you'll literally turn into a savage as much as a pervert in reality. Have they seen what people like Justiniano, um, Gerard Jones, and Neil Gaiman were accused of? There are unfortunately perverts who can give clues to what's wrong with their mindsets in their very script writing, and while not every artist writer who deals with crude stuff is guilty of real life offenses, that doesn't mean it's healthy to make nasty things look like a celebration in comics and other books. Sometimes it helps to promote life, love, and family a lot more, and tragically, too few comics and films do that today. And of course, in Avi's opinion, there. Also, in another note about Mouse, um, something tells me they'd never produce anything similar discussing Islamic jihadism and its devastating effect not just on Jews, but everyone civilized, seeing what direction Spiegelman recently took. The twosome at the magazine continued. Oh boy. Now he's trying to make it sound like they're a couple. How cute. Oh boy. Freeman, defend which parts specifically? Nadell, even just starting outright that it's art and won't hurt anyone. My editor wisely pushed back on that, asking if I was really sure an image of art and decapitation couldn't hurt anyone. A reasonable question. And then Avi's response to this here. Avi's response to that statement. Why not ask whether it could influence anybody the wrong way, if portrayed the wrong way? If Nadell's saying, however, that he understood there's a limit to how far one should go in writing up a story involving graphic and sexual violence, that's certainly amazing. If anything, such elements shouldn't be played for laughs and cheap sensationalism. Back to the interview here. Freeman. He had his bros and his hoes. Oh, God. Crumb resisted conventional relationships with women and refused to be locked down into monogamy, which feels very relevant today. I see many men in New York City acting similarly with women, agreeing to it despite not liking it. He pushed the limits of non-monogamy until someone finally said, quote unquote, enough. Nadell, it's funny because normally we wouldn't even discuss his relationships except they're such a big part of his work, so it's unavoidable. Freeman, and a significant part of the book, too, his move to the country compound also seems tied to that 60s back to earth culture. It's wild how long he maintained that lifestyle. It seemed violent, unpleasant, impossible to sustain. Nadell, absolutely writing about it. The franticness and unpleasantness felt so foreign to my operating system, but Crumb's mind was so open, I could see why the chaos made a kind of sense to him. Freeman, is it an incel fallout? Going from feeling like he'd never get laid to suddenly having the floodgates open and refusing to turn off the tap? Nadell, yes and no. Not turning off the tap is one thing. plotting your whole life around getting laid, taking 3-hour bus rides, that's another level of effort. He's a compulsive guy, record sex comic, drugs too, and then Freeman says drugs too. Oh boy. And then Avi's response to this. If Crumb was glorifying drugs, that's not something even an adult should celebrate. Stuff like cocaine's hurt only so many people, and even if it's not as severe as the issue of Islamic jihadism, that still doesn't mean drug abuse is acceptable. And then back to the interview here. Nadell. Someone I interviewed insisted I ask Crumb about it, but I didn't. Freeman. Although he does maintain an admitted hatred of women, Nadell, he maintains a hatred of humans, period. And women for sure. But he also loves women. Okay. Freeman, he's like, quote, I love women. I have pages full of women. I have binders full of women, unquote. Sounds almost like obsessed. I think women should probably watch out for this guy, apparently. Nadell. I wouldn't call him a feminist. He maintains his love-hate thing. Love-hate thing. And certainly with Aline, that marriage would not have lasted if he hadn't changed on a pretty fundamental level. Now, here's Avi responding to what we just read there. On this, I wonder what they think of how, more of recent, the very crowd Crumb once pandered to turned against him in the past decade. Unfortunately, that same crowd didn't do so because they concluded his satires, quote unquote, were vulgar and offensive, but likely because it could serve as a mirror of what liberalism could have a problem with approving of. But does or did Crumb ever have a hatred of women? Well, if he made jokes about sexual assault, that can be considered misogyny incarnate. But again, considering what double standards the left has and where they went with LGBT ideology the past decade, chances are they're not being altruistic on this subject either. Anyway, it sure is odd how in years after the word incel may have been coined by leftists as a form of negative slang for sex-obsessed pop culture fans, these particular artists and writers who show all signs of being equally leftist themselves are suddenly making it sound positive. And it's possible Nadell's putting out a Crumb biography because most of the utter nonsense for the past decade on social media is worn off. And Nadell feels it's easier to develop a biography about such a controversial figure now, but it also indicates there are still leftist types with lenient positions on serious issues. And that's very unfortunate because how is society supposed to be tidied up of any vulgarity it's been littered with if nobody's at least going to question whether mistakes can be made with art and entertainment? That's something that needs to be seriously pondered in coming years. All right, so there we go with that one. So yeah, Avi Green basically does have quite a bit of a bite to his commentary here on a lot of these issues. Um, before we do get to the other article, I do need to step away from the computer for a moment, so I'll be right back. But what I will do is I'll put some music on to entertain you guys. I'll be right back. I'm back. So, again, if you guys can help out by liking and sharing the stream, see if we can get some more friendly people in here to engage. It'd be appreciated. Also, if anything here grabs your attention, feel free to comment and or ask questions. I'll try to answer the questions to the best of my ability. With that being said, let's get ready to move on to the next article here. The last article for the night here. Published yesterday, of course. So the question is, did normies ruin comic books? Article by Brian Niemeyer, published yesterday, April 24th. So, you've heard the refrain from comic book nerds a million times. Quote, normies ruin the comics industry, unquote. But did they? In his classic video, author David Stewart addresses the theory. From the transcript. This is from the transcript of the video they're talking about here. I don't think that normal or mainstream people ruined comics at all. I actually think it was the opposite. Comics were taken out of the mainstream, and I'd like to explain my conclusion to that. But before I do, let me make a distinction between what I'm talking about. So, if you have a small dedicated subculture, and then you have an influx of normal people to it, that makes it explode in popularity. Obviously, that's going to fundamentally alter the culture, subculture, in ways that the creators of the subculture don't want it to be altered. It's going to dilute some of the things that make it special. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about in this is the reality that comic books used to be more popular than they are, and the mainstream interest for them was removed because the product was changed. Yeah, and I think I see the point he's making there. I mean, look, people are here. American readers are going more to manga nowadays because you know most Japanese writers and most manga don't sit there and worry about what the West is doing. They just write their stuff, and then if you like it, fine. If you don't, then fine too. Right away, I recognize that David is offering a rebuttal to mop theory, which states that geeks create a cool new scene, which is inevitably destroyed by an invasion of mops, aka normies. In fact, David argues for the diametric opposite position. Hmm. All right. Anyways, back to the article here. Let's see. I'd like to read a little bit of a quote for you that supports my point of view and distills down this idea that comics were taken away from the normies, not ruined by the normies. So this is an interview with Jim Shooter, who was in charge of Marvel for about 10 years in the 1980s. And his basic thesis about the problem with modern comic boils down to storytelling. That they don't tell good stories that people are interested in. That's the background of this quote. Let me read it. Quote, it takes forever to tell a story, unquote. He's talking about what he calls, quote, decompressed storytelling, unquote. It's like a soap opera, quote, it takes forever to tell a story. When Stan Lee would put in 6 pages, it takes 6 months, parentheses now, or in brackets now. Quote, so you look at the sales, Marvel Comics are not $4 a piece, and they're thrilled that the sales are over 30,000. When I was at Marvel, the whole world was different. We didn't have a single title. We had 75 titles. We didn't have a single one that sold below 100,000. We had the X-Men approaching 750,000. Quote, and that's not some special number or somebody dies or changes costumes or someone gets married. It was every time. Probably that last idea about somebody getting married, that might have been a shot at the whole thing going on with Spider-Man and Mary Jane right now, the debate out there between Tom Brevoort and Marvel fans. But anyways, a lot of it was single copy readers. People weren't running around buying cases of it. It had a foil embossed over, So it was every issue. So with that quote, you basically have my thesis, which is that comics at one point in time were extremely mainstream. I remember as a kid seeing comic books on the shelf at the drugstore, like in the 1980s. And I saw them. I saw them in some of my local stores too. I'm sure many of us have seen them at when we were kids. For those of us who are probably like maybe 40 and up, probably do remember seeing them in local in like your local grocery store, drugstore, what have you. Um, let's see. In fact, I remember buying Ninja Turtles comics off of the shelf and reading them. Not going to a comic book store. I didn't set foot in a comic book store until like the 1990s. It was kind of a weird thing when comic book stores became the place where you had to buy comics. So at one point in time, these things are really mainstream, and they've gone away from being mainstream and actually been captured and become a subculture. Um, so it's really like a subculture recaptured the industry and started excluding all of the things which may make the comics appealing to the mainstream. And they had a video connection there, but we'll go through that. Let's see. Whatever the cause of the comic book industry's demise, conclusion is irrefutable. Marvel and DC are dead. Move on. Wow, that's a pretty direct thing to say there, Brian. But, all right, so there we go with that. Oh, let's see now. Alrighty then. So with that, we got through the two articles. So now what we're going to do is we're going to jump right into um, wrestling wrap up, as we do have quite a bit to talk about. Looking back to last night's Ring of Honor and TNA shows, looking ahead to this weekend's action, including, of course, TNA Rebellion, of course, tonight's SmackDown, tomorrow night's AEW Collision. Let me talk about some of that now. So the first thing, of course, we're going to look to last night's Ring of Honor show. As it was from the MGM Music Hall at Fenway, Boston, Massachusetts, with Caprice Coleman and Ian Riccaboni on commentary. Opening match saw an 8-man tag match in which the premier athletes of Arya Daivari and Tony Nese, with Mark Sterling in their corner, teamed up with the Righteous of Dutch and Vincent to defeat the Spanish announce team of Angelico and Serpentico and the returning Kingdom duo of Mike Bennett and Matt Taven. In a match that was initially recorded from Baltimore, Maryland on April 9th, 2025, Lance Archer defeated Crowbar. Now, some of you may remember Crowbar from back in the late 90s, early 2000s, from his time like in WCW, among other places. Also wrestled under the name Devon Storm, of course. At 51 years old, yes, he still occasionally wrestles. Nowadays he's more of a physical therapist, but he's also will occasionally wrestle. And he looked pretty good in this match, all things considered. In a proving ground match, Ashley Vox challenged challenged Red Velvet, and if Ashley had won the match, she would have been able to challenge for the Ring of Honor Women's World Television title. The main event saw another 8-man tag in which A.R. Fox, Mark Briscoe, and Top Flight of the Martin Brothers, Dante and Darius Martin, defeat Shane Taylor Promotions of Lee Moriarty, Shane Taylor, and the Infantry. Also on last night's Ring of Honor show, it was announced that Ring of Honor would be having a tournament to crown the first women's pure title. Now, the men's title, of course, has had a long history. Now, the pure championship has certain specific rules. Like you only get 3 rope breaks a match. Once you've used up all your rope breaks, that's it. Somebody locks you in a hold, and you can't escape it. You can't escape it by going to the ropes. You either have to fight your way out of it. Obviously, you can't in a pure match. You can't hit with your fist. You can slap them. You can chop them. Hit with the open hand, but you can't hit with your fist. It's, as they say, a pure championship. You can forearm them. You can do European uppercuts. You can do just about anything there. Well, anyway, so that's all of that for Ring of Honor. Now let's go and talk about TNA Impact. As this, of course, is the go-home Impact before this Sunday's Revolution. The opening match saw the System's X Division champion Moose and JDC defeat Ace Austin and Trey Miguel in a tag match. Of course, Moose and Ace Austin will be participants in the X Division in the Ultimate X match on Sunday, as Moose defends the X Division title in the Ultimate X match. We'll get into more details on that in a moment. NXT's JC Jane, accompanied to the ring by her Fatal Attraction stablemates of Fallon Henley and Jasmine Nix, defeat Rosemary. Tessa Blanchard, in preparation for her upcoming Knockout World title match, defeated Missa Kate in just over 4 minutes. TNA World Champion Joe Hendry and Elijah defeated Frankie Kazarian and Ethan Page. And of course, Kazarian and Page are Joe Hendry's opponents this Sunday in a triple threat match. Again, we'll get into all that. And that's all that was on there for that match. So now, with that being said, let's look ahead to Sunday. As coming up on Sunday will be Rebellion. There'll be TNA Rebellion coming up this Sunday, the 27th. Coming from the Galen Center here in Los Angeles, California. The night we'll see in a 6-man tag match, Ace Austin and the Rascals of Trey Miguel and Zachary Wentz, with Sean Waltman in their corner, will be taking on the System's Eddie Edwards, Brian Myers, and JDC, with Alicia Edwards in their corner. In a 4-way match for the TNA Knockout World Tag Team titles, the Elegance brand of Ash and Heather by Elegance will be defending the TNA Knockout World title against NXT's Gigi Dolan and Tatum Paxley. Jakara Jackson and Lash Legend of Metaphor, also from NXT. And former Knockouts Tag Team Champions Spitfire, Danny Luna, and Jody Threat. In a Falls Count Anywhere match, Mustafa Ali takes on Mike Santana. Santana looks to avenge his previous loss last at last month's event to Mustafa Ali. Steve Macklin, having won the TNA International title, becoming the first TNA International title winner, champion, this a little over a week ago, last Thursday, the 17th, at Unbreakable, is set to defend the title against the opponent he didn't pin in the match, Eric Young. He got the pinfall, I guess, on AJ Francis. So now he has to, now as per the stipulation, he now has to take on one-on-one the person who didn't get pinned. This case is Eric Young. And now it's been established that the Ultimate, so Moose will be defending the TNA X Division title, the Ultimate X match, in which usually an X, but in this case it will be the TNA X Division title itself will be hung up over the ring by a pair of cords or wires that make an X in the middle, and at the intersection where they cross, that's where the TNA and the object will be to climb the turnbuckles and then kind of rope walk or hand crawl on the cord, undo the X Division title and take it down. He will be defending the X Division title against Matt Cardona, Casey Navarro, Triple A's El Hijo del Vikingo, Sidney Hakim, and Leon Slater. Leon Slater is still trying to become the youngest X Division champion ever. In a match of the TNA World Tag Team titles, the Hardys, Jeff and Matt Hardy, defend the belts against Nick and Ryan Nemeth, the Nemeth brothers. The Hardys had a little fun with the Nemeths last night, apparently, on from what I heard, on Impact, as they tormented the Nemeth brothers as the Nemeth brothers decided to go to the Hardy compound. Now, for those of you who remember last year, they did the same thing to the System as well. So, let's see. Masha Slamovich defends the TNA Knockouts World title against Tessa Blanchard. And then Joe Hendry defends the TNA World title in a three-way match against the aforementioned Frankie Kazarian and Ethan Page. So now, with that being said, let's take a look ahead to tonight's SmackDown. Let's see what's going to go on SmackDown tonight, so I can find on something that will take us to it. All right. On tonight's SmackDown, coming from Fort Worth, Texas, from the Dickies Arena, already slated for tonight's show. Zelina Vega will actually be getting a shot at the United States title against Chelsea Green, as of course she had a surprise upset about a week ago when Chelsea Green didn't hear the count and didn't get back in the ring, and Zelina Vega was able to earn a shot at the United States because of that. And in a tables, ladders, and chairs three-way match, the Street Profits will be defending the WWE Tag Titles against former champions both the Motor City Machine Guns and DIY. So that's all going down as, of course, WWE is continuing to march towards Backlash in a couple weeks here. And also now looking ahead to tomorrow night's Collision. We'll look ahead to tomorrow night's Collision as soon as I can. AEW Collision as AEW continues to march towards Double or Nothing next month. On tomorrow night's Collision, Swerve Strickland is set to take on Blake Christian. Tony Storm will in a AEW Women's World Title Eliminator match, in which if the challenger wins, then they'll get a future shot at the Women's World Champion. Tony Storm will try to fend off the challenge of Queen Aminata, who, as we said earlier, was also participating in the Pure Title tournament, the women's Pure Title tournament in Ring of Honor. Hologram will be taking on Max Caster. Max Caster continues to try to ingratiate himself with these open challenges. Anna Jay makes her in-ring return after about a month or so, taking on Taylor Gainey. In a tornado tag team match, the Martin brothers, Dante and Darius Martin, Top Flight, with Layla Gray in their corner, will be taking on Crew of Action Andretti and Leo Rush. Bandito defends the Ring of Honor World title against Dralistico. Former Ring of Honor World Champion Roosh takes on AR Fox. And in the main event, we'll see FTR after their recent heel turn, Dax Harwood and Cash Wheeler, with Stokely Hathaway in their corner, taking on the newly termed Paragon of Kyle O'Reilly and Roderick Strong, and of course, Adam Cole is also part of that unit. So that's all I got for the wrestling wrap-up for you guys. So now with that, hey, Metal, thanks for popping in and saying hi. If you haven't already, you can help out by liking and sharing the stream, of course. See if we can get some more friendly people in here to engage. That'd be appreciated. But anyways, now with that being said, got one more piece of thing to do before we sign up for the night. So today being Friday, April 25th, 2025, let's go ahead and take a look back at this date in Niche history. History! So let me just do all this. 10 and... I kind of forgot about that, but anyways. All right, so first off, I'm going to head back to 2001. As on this date back in 2001, which was, of course, was 24 years ago today. On this date, 24 years ago today. This date, 24 years ago today. The 20th issue of Volume 2 of Batman Beyond went on sale on this date back in 2001. The story was New Jokers and Old Friends, written by Jason Hernandez Rosenblatt, penciled by Craig Rousseau. Rob Lee did the inking. Lettering was done by John Costanza, and then Shannon Blanchard did the coloring. On this date, 24 years ago today, the 20th issue of Volume 2 of Batman Beyond from DC Comics went on sale on this date back in 2001. Sold for $1.99, 32 pages. New Jokers and Old Friends was the name of the story. So now moving on to the next piece of niche history, as it were. Moving ahead to the year 2005, 20 years ago today. So we'll grab that. On this date, 20 years ago today, WWE held its Monday Night Raw event from the NEC Arena in Birmingham, England. It was the Go Home Raw before the Backlash pay-per-view. And on this show, of course, the main event saw Batista defeat Christian in a singles match with Jonathan Coachman as a special guest referee. Christian, of course, had Triple H in his corner. In a battle of two brothers-in-law, Edge defeated Val Venus. Khosrow Davari and Muhammad Hassan defeated William Regal and Tajiri. And then the night opened up with Chris Jericho defeating Sylvain Grenier of La Resistance. So that was 20 years ago today. WWE held its Monday Night Raw event, the Go Home Raw before Backlash. So now moving on to the next piece of niche history here. And we move ahead to 2010, 15 years ago today. On this date, 15 years ago today, South Park is banned in Sri Lanka due to the controversy over episode 200, which depicted Gautama Buddha snorting cocaine. Now, of course, we did kind of talk about this, obviously, obviously 11 days ago, because back on the 14th of that year, when episode 200, they did get some backlash over how they used Muhammad in the cartoon. So now this is another kind of reaction to that. And let's see. And finally, as we move ahead to 2015, on this date 10 years ago today, Kyoto Animation's Beyond the Boundary, I'll Be Here Future Arc premiered in Japanese theaters on this date back in 2015. So 10 years ago today, Kyoto Animation's Beyond the Boundary, I'll Be Here, the Future Arc premiered, and it was an original story set 1 year after the anime television series Beyond the Boundary. So the Future Arc, Beyond the Boundary, the movie for that premiered on this date back in the year 2015, 10 years ago. Based South Park. Okay. All right. So with that, I thank you guys for being here tonight. Hope you all enjoyed the show. We'll be back here Sunday we'll be back here on Sunday, as I'll be joined by Apex from Apex Comics. We will be, of course, looking back to comics went on sale in May of 1940. We'll be looking at Fawcett Comics, Wiz Comics Volume 1, Issue 6, and the first 3 issues of Nickel Comics. Well, I'll get more into that. And with that, I hope everybody enjoyed the show, and I will see you all on Sunday. Bye.